Let's get started with our first news. Khamzat Chim will win against Darius Duplessis after a big victory over Marvin Vettori at the Apex. Earlier this month, Roman Daisy is keeping a close eye on the middleweight title picture. Although nothing is set in stone, yet the expectation is that after a dominant victory over Robert Whittaker, Khamzat Chim will likely get the next shot at Darius Duplessis. The way Daisy sees it, Khamzat's aggressive style could lead to an early win whenever he and DDP step inside the octagon. During an interview with H-Fight, he broke down the fight, saying Khamzat is a very skillful fighter and a hard worker. Khamzat has probably the highest level of wrestling in our division. A great guy with great skills in grappling. Not super high level on the ground, but he has the skills to finish anybody when he's on top. And if he manages, and I think he will, to take down Darius in the first couple of rounds and finish him, then I will say that Khamzat will win. However, if the fight stretches into later rounds, believes that DDP will have the advantage. There's still no word on when exactly this fight will take place, but it's shaping up to be one of the most anticipated matchups of the year. A likely spot for this Showdown International Fight Week. If a Jon Jones versus Tom Aspinall fight doesn't materialize, this could be the perfect matchup to take center stage. Back in November, Dana White went on record saying that he wants Khamzat to fight for a title in the United States, with International Fight Week being the biggest pay-per-view event of the year for the UFC. This would be a perfect chance for the promotion to put eyes on this fight. Imagine the hype, Khamzat Chim stepping in for his first title shot in front of a packed crowd in the U.S., facing off against Darius Duplessis, the current middleweight champion. The clash of styles. The wrestling dominance of Khamzat, the endurance and power of DDP. This fight has all the makings of an explosive showdown. Will Khamzat make a statement and destroy his opponent early? Or will Darius survive the storm and take over in the later rounds? Only time will. Moving on to our second news, Sean Brady still harbors animosity toward Leon Edwards, even after securing a huge victory over the former champion with a guillotine choke in the fourth round at UFC London. Over the weekend, Brady hasn't let go of his grudge against Edwards. Brady revealed that after the fight he attempted to show respect and offer words of encouragement to Leon. However, both Leon and his team dismissed him entirely. This cold reception has only fueled Brady's frustration, making him regret not being even more aggressive inside the octagon. In fact, he now wishes he had been meaner to Leon and landed even harder shots during the fight. Recalling the post-fight moment, Brady stated, "After the fight, I was like, yo, you were a great champion, blah blah blah. But obviously he just got choked out, so he was upset. Then his whole team just blew us off. Then I see the interviews afterward. He was saying about me, and I wish I was even meaner to him, to be honest." Brady emphasized that he typically carries himself with respect. But if someone disrespects him, he has no problem giving it right back. "I'm very respectful. But if you're an a-hole to me," he was saying, "I was small-talking at all week. And I knew I can't wait to wrap my hands around him." Brady then touched on a common misconception about his size, pointing out that opponents may underestimate him based on appearance, but once he gets a hold of them, they quickly realize his physical strength and grappling dominance. "People see me and think I'm small, but wait until I grab you and you can't get away." I could see him breaking under me, and that was the entire fight. Brady even revealed that his coaches could see Edwards mentally breaking as the fight progressed. "My coaches were screaming, 'Look at that! He's breaking in his corner.' His coaches were telling him fairy tales, trying to get him back in the fight. But lightning ain't striking twice in the bottle, buddy." To top it off, Brady admitted that looking back, he wished he had done even more damage. "I wish I would have hit him even harder." Fans have jumped ship and are now on Aspinall's side. This highlights a growing shift in public opinion. With Jones constantly postponing fights and Aspinall being the hungry active contender, more and more fans are starting to rally behind the Brit. While 6 months seems like a long time in the fight game, Whittaker pointed out that it's not entirely uncommon for top-level matchups. 6 months seems like a lot, but most fights get 4 months of prep time. So the big question remains, will Jon Jones actually fight Tom Aspinall? Or is this just another game of cat and mouse that will end with Jones either pulling out or retiring? Only time will tell. Next up, Alex Pereira's rival turns down UFC contract. In a surprising move, Artem Vaji, a former kickboxing rival of Alex Pereira, has turned down a UFC contract despite securing an impressive first-round victory on Dana White's Contender Series last October. What makes this even more intriguing is that Pereira himself was sitting cage-side, watching Vaji's performance unfold. The history between these two fighters runs deep. Vaji and Pereira are 1-to-1 against each other in kickboxing. Many fans saw Vaji's dominant victory as the perfect setup for a highly anticipated rubber match with Pereira inside the UFC's octagon. However, rather than accepting the contract and making the transition to MMA, Vaji has opted to return to Glory Kickboxing instead. After his win on Contender Series, Vaji was offered a UFC contract, but he and his team were not satisfied with the deal. Vaji explained his decision, saying, "The UFC has very strict conditions for fighters from Dana White's Contender Series. They weren't able to offer me more than the standard contract. My team tried to negotiate, but UFC rules were strict. We couldn't change anything." This statement sheds light on a growing concern among fighters who earn contracts through the Contender Series. Many of them feel locked into rigid contracts with low pay and limited bargaining power compared to UFC veterans. For Vaji, the money and freedom in Glory Kickboxing made more sense than signing a restrictive UFC deal, while Vaji may have turned down a UFC contract he didn't hold back when discussing Pereira's skills. In a bold statement, he downplayed Pereira's abilities, saying, "He has no defense. He has only one punch. I could find the keys and win against him easily." This is a strong claim considering that Pereira has become a 2-division UFC champion and has knocked out some of the most dangerous strikers in MMA, including Israel Adesanya and Jerry Paza. Whether this is just trash talk or a legitimate challenge, Vaji clearly believes he has what it takes to beat Pereira again. With Vaji staying in kickboxing and Pereira continuing his dominant run in MMA, a rematch seems unlikely, at least for now. However, if Vaji ever reconsiders his UFC future, the storyline is already built in for a high-profile showdown between these former rivals. For now, Pereira remains focused on his UFC legacy, while Vaji will continue his journey in Glory Kickboxing. Dana White and the UFC are once again under fire, facing major backlash from the MMA community over fighter pay. This has been a long-standing issue, but the recent outrage has reignited discussions about how little fighters are compensated compared to the revenue the UFC generates. Many fans and analysts believe that one of the biggest reasons the UFC is struggling to produce new superstars is that the company refuses to pay top-tier fighters competitive wages. The issue of fighter pay has been a controversial topic for years, but recent events have put it back in the spotlight. The UFC has been criticized for offering fighters, even champions, and highly contenders relatively low pay compared to other major sports organizations. Unlike boxing or other combat sports where elite fighters can earn tens of millions per fight, UFC fighters often struggle to secure fair contracts, with many still earning low base salaries. Despite their talent and popularity, many fans took to social media to express their frustration with the UFC's business model. One fan wrote, "UFC only pays 17% of their revenue to fighters. That's why the UFC is in a constant downfall." This claim is based on reports that suggest the UFC's fighter pay percentage is significantly lower than in other major sports leagues. In contrast, leagues like the NBA, NFL, and MLB allocate close to 50% of their revenue to athletes, making the UFC's pay structure seem unfair in comparison. Another frustrated fan sarcastically commented, "Can't believe a champion kickboxer didn't want to make 10 grand twice a year." This was in reference to Artem Vaji, a former kickboxing rival of Alex Pereira, who recently turned down a UFC contract. His decision to reject the offer highlighted how little Dana White and the UFC are willing to pay new fighters, even those with strong combat sports backgrounds. If a proven champion from another discipline isn't willing to sign due to the low pay, it raises serious questions about the UFC's ability to attract top talent. Another fan didn't hold back, simply stating, "This company is pathetic." The backlash is growing, and it's not just from fans. Fighters, both past and present, have spoken out about the pay structure. Former champions like Francis Ngannou and Jake Paul have actively criticized the UFC, with Ngannou even leaving the promotion to sign a more lucrative deal with the PFL. As more fighters begin to weigh their options, the pressure on Dana White and the UFC will only continue to increase. Whether this backlash leads to any real change remains to be seen. But for now, the debate over fighter pay remains a hot topic. In the MMA world, Jon Jones has just received a massive $50 million offer to fight Francis Ngannou, a matchup that the MMA world has been waiting to see for years. While fans are currently focused on whether Jones will fight Tom Aspinall, the possibility of a showdown with Ngannou is back in the conversation. PFL founder Don Davis made waves on social media by openly extending the offer to Jones, suggesting that this fight would finally determine the true heavyweight champion. Davis posted on social media, "I know one way Jon Jones earns $50 million fighting Francis Ngannou to decide the true heavyweight champion." The offer is significant, as it would be one of the biggest paydays in MMA history. However, the question remains, will Jones accept it? Many fans doubt that he will, given his history of avoiding this fight in the past. When Ngannou was still in the UFC, a fight between the two seemed inevitable, but negotiations fell apart, and Ngannou eventually left the promotion. Now, with this massive financial incentive on the table, the pressure is on Jones to make a decision. Tom Aspinall wasted no time in reacting to the news, taking a direct shot at Jones and accusing him of manipulating the media and avoiding tough fights. Jones is conning the public man, and he didn't want to fight Ngannou for 3 years, and now he doesn't want to fight me. He manipulates the media and the public super smart. But do I think he's scared to take the tough fights? Absolutely. Aspinall's frustration is understandable. As the interim UFC heavyweight champion, he has been waiting for a shot at Jones. But Jones's recent injury delayed any potential matchup. Now, with the offer from the PFL on the table, it raises the question of whether Jones will prioritize a super fight with Ngannou over defending his UFC title against Aspinall. The MMA community is divided. Some believe that Jones has nothing left to prove in the UFC, and that taking a $50 million fight against Ngannou is a no-brainer. Others argue that he has an obligation to defend his title against Aspinall, who has proven himself to be a worthy challenger. While things seem to be moving in the right direction behind the scenes,